For 1985, the bigwigs at Mattel, and by bigwigs I mean the people that had really big wigs on, decided that they were going to pump some new blood into the Masters of the Universe line by introducing a new evil faction called the Horde, not to be confused with Genghis Khan and his empire. Now, there were a lot of unique things about the Horde, and one of them being that they were enemies of both He-Man and the Masters and Skeletor, but also they were all very unique characters. And what I mean by that is, no, they didn't have unique personalities, meaning they didn't really share tooling the way many of the early figures in MOTU did, especially, look at Skeletor and all his main goons. Well, why was this? Sales! Sales equal tooling. The better a line sells, the more tooling you get. And in 1985, MOTU was pretty much at the height of its popularity, which meant outside of Hordak, almost every figure was fully tooled. Okay, well, Grizzlor had a lot of shared parts too, but he had a big furry glove over him. Alright, one character that was completely fully tooled and did not share parts, I can swear I can pull this off, was Mantenna. Now, okay, well, first off, Mantenna was absolutely one of my favorite toys growing up as a kid. And he tends to get, illustrated by fans in many different ways. Sometimes he's shown as being more insect-like and very thin with spindly legs. And other times as toys he's a little thicker, and usually this is purely from a engineering standpoint. He needed a very thick chest cavity in order for the eyes to be able to retract in and out. So for those of you who were blessed to have had this toy as a child in the 80s, there was a little lever on the back, and as you moved it up and down, the eyes would pop out. Come on, that just doesn't get cooler for a young boy. An insect guy with pop-out eyes. On the She-Ra show, he was a bit more of a whiny, complainy kind of guy, and he was a lot thinner. Kind of that whole spindly, insecty look, even when he was, helping little girls before he threw them into the lake. Okay, that was a Frankenstein reference for the Boris Karloff film, never mind. Well, the toy, obviously, yes, it couldn't be as spindly because of the need to accommodate the action feature, the mechanism in the chest, but what was also interesting is that his four legs got fused together. And honestly, I didn't even notice this till I was older, that he had four legs, and the toy just had them as two legs. Each leg was composed of two. This kept the spindly look, but it made him have the same proportions as most other MOTU figures. So we never really got kind of like the crab walking, all spindly, thin leg Mantenna that winds up in a lot of artwork and, well, tends to be what he gets in the animated series because, well, when you're animated, you don't have to worry about housing a mechanism inside of your chest. Now, there have been a lot of Mantenna figures, some of them with no articulation like the Staction figure from the post-2000X line that the Horseman did in order to try to include more characters, and of course, all of it starting with the original. He looks a lot like the concept art, too. He didn't change that much. The eyes got a little bit smaller, and you could see, again, the legs got fused together, and the arms were a little thicker because of the proportions. You couldn't have this super thin-legged insect and have it still have pop-out eyes. We have gotten super thin versions of Mantenna as action figures, but the action feature then gets removed. That's the reason for the large chest, because you have to have it to enclose the mechanism. So most MOTU toy lines tend to include Mantenna. He's one of the first Horde members that pops up, and for a character that needs a lot of tooling, it really shows how beloved this character is, from, his pincher jaws to his giant ears and buggy eyes. No way to put that but buggy. He's awesome. And the Classics figure, oh, wow, did the Horseman knock this one out. I was so excited to finally get a Mantenna with fully articulated legs, as in 4 legs. Now, it was the same leg. The left leg and the right leg put on twice. He doesn't have 4 uniquely tooled legs. But for a basic figure with a giant head and 4 legs and, all of this tooling, I don't think, maybe except for the hands and the feet, maybe, I don't know. But yeah, he was a lot of tooling, and we had to be very careful spacing these characters out. And I love that by the time we got to Mantenna, we had enough Horde members released that we could populate the entire cross-cell with members of the Horde and not just throw in some, She-Ra, POP female warriors as enemies, but we could legitimately, really display the Horde. Now, how we were going to pay homage and pull off the action feature was a challenge because, well, the first thing we thought of was doing 2 different heads, right? You have one head with the eyes bugging out and one head with the eyes in. You'll notice there's no lever on the back, so you don't have to have that sort of mechanism jutting out, and that was a big part of classics, is we would do quote-unquote action features as long as it didn't affect the sculpt. But having a mechanism inside with a lever on the back was going to affect the sculpt. We did look into having sort of a lever poking out as part of the armor, kind of like how we did on Cyclone. The vintage action figure had a dial on his waist, and as you'd spin it with your thumb, causing immense amounts of pain in your thumb, he would spin around and his arms would fly up. Well, again, this would require a mechanism inside of the chest cavity, which required a lot of tooling, but what we did do was include a little lever on the belt that was meant as an homage to the lever that activated the spinning feature. It didn't do anything, and it certainly didn't hurt your thumb. I mean, I guess you could smash your thumb into it if you purposely wanted to do that, but it was an homage action feature. Now, we'd established really from day one the idea of doing multiple heads, especially when there were either two looks for a character, like the case with Merman, where you had the classic toy look and the version from the back of the package based on the early concept art before he got cost reduced. Then, of course, you had the example of characters who had an action feature involving their mouth, like Tongue Lasher, and we could recreate that action feature with an alternate head and avoid the mechanism. This was what the plan was for Mantenna, so the original idea was we were going to give him two heads. Then we costed that out and realized because his head is so big, because he's got all those teeth and the ears and the whole Megillah, well, it wasn't going to be possible to give him four legs and two heads. And then we definitely didn't want to cut the legs, because there had never been a fully articulated Mantenna before. And that was, well, it was really important. So we talked to the Horseman, how in the world can we pull this off? And the solution we came up with was we were going to have pull-out eyes, where you would pull out the eyes on the stalks and then pop in unpopped out eyes without the stalks, and you could just recreate both looks. You didn't need two different heads. Unfortunately, this wasn't working so much, but great idea, compromise was come up that the mouthpiece was going to be also removable. Now, he was not meant to display like this, much like Shiro was not meant to display with the mask off to see the hole in the head. But this allowed you to pull off the mouth and the eyes, and then you could construct the face however you wanted. Kind of like, Mr. Potato Head. So you sort of had your own Masters of the Universe, Mr. Potato Head, and you could plug in, heck, you could do one stalk eye, one not stalk eye. You could do it with the mouth and not the mouth. I mean, I don't know why you want to do that. And he does kind of look like a weird skeleton creature when you pull all the pieces out. But I got to hand it to engineering and the Horseman. This was a genius idea, and it worked. Now, what's the future for Mantenna look like? Well, hopefully bright, because there's been a figure that's been shown for Origins, and with four legs, so yay, four-legged Mantennas. I'm really excited this character is coming out, and I may actually have to get this Origins figure, since I loved him so much as a kid, and to now get one with all four legs on a vintage-scaled body, that's a really cool thing. It looks like they've done a slightly different action feature with a push button to eject the eyes, but hey, an action feature is an action feature, and if they can afford that on a fully tooled figure, that's awesome news. I love Mantenna, and I'll get any Mantenna figure, well, except for all the ones that I didn't buy. But otherwise, yeah, he does hang out on my desk, and I'm so glad we got to him. Those fully tooled figures are not easy to pull off.